this is Dustin Mooney with TechX Cyber. We are a cybersecurity consulting firm that offers cyber protections as well as investigations when things go wrong. You can reach out to me with my email below. I'm dustin@techxcyber.com. Today I'm going to be chatting about selling more cyber liability insurance. There's a lot of discussion in the industries right now about the topic of cyber liability insurance, and one of them that continues to come up is the fact that sales agents in the insurance industry tend to struggle selling cyber liability insurance. Now, that's an understandable thing. It's a difficult topic to discuss, and when you're working on selling a product, it's very important to know the ins and outs of what you're actually selling. This can be really challenging for sales individuals that don't have a background in cybersecurity. So, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to unpack some of the key words and phrases, as well as an approach that you can use to start selling more cyber liability insurance. What we're going to be doing is we're going to work to bring together a company's cyber risks, the processes, the missions, the goals, and the objectives that they're working towards, and the information systems that are supporting those, and helping them to understand how and why their business relies on those information systems, and why we need to protect them and insure them in case something goes wrong. So let's go ahead and jump into this. If you've ever watched one of my other videos or presentations, you've heard me talk about risk. This is a very light and brief overview. If you want more specifics, if you want to expose yourself to these words more consistently, would be a good idea. Go ahead and go over to my YouTube channel. You can follow along and listen to some more discussions about risk that go into a little bit more detail that can help you understand these more. But for the sake of this presentation, I'll just do a light touch here. So risk is the multiplication of the likelihood of a negative cybersecurity event by the impact that that event may have on data and systems. Once we understand the impacts to the data and systems, we can extrapolate how those impacts may actually impact the business as well. So what we want to do here is really home in on the impact side of the risk formula. The likelihood can come a little bit later. There are often some cybersecurity questionnaires that get sent over asking if particular documents have been created or if any cybersecurity best practices have been implemented. But what we want to do to actually make the sale is to bring impact to the front and bring some awareness to that. So I want to talk about how we can do that. In cybersecurity, we use the term the CIA triad to discuss impacts, and as you see below here, these are these three items. The first one is confidentiality. This is the need to keep information secret from people who don't have access to it or should not have access to it. The next one is integrity. Can we trust that the information and the data that we're accessing has not been changed or altered? And then finally, availability. Can we get to the system? Can we get to the data continuously and consistently without interruption? And so these three concepts are things that we're going to be tying to the information systems that a business is using. So let's talk about what that looks like. To be able to do that, the first thing that we need to do is we need to understand what are the missions, goals, and objectives of the business. Now, it may be difficult to identify the risks and the impacts here, but it's a good starting point to understand what is this business doing. So item number 1 here says determine the purpose. We need to ask questions. What is your business doing? What are you selling? How are you supporting the sales team, the marketing team, the delivery team? Anybody making the product. So we need to get an understanding of what are the business functions that are happening on a day-to-day basis. These functions are what supports the business's mission, goals, and objectives. So by understanding the mission, goals, and objectives first, we can start asking questions about what are the day-to-day items that we need to understand. Now, the reason we need to understand what the day-to-day items are is because typically, in this day and age, most of these day-to-day functions are supported through, number 2, support systems, IT systems, web applications. And so these support systems is what we really want to home into, but we need to start at the top and work our way down. So once we understand what the day-to-day functions are, we can start asking questions. So I'll just use some examples here. So, every business has some sort of accounting function, and to operate these accounting functions these days, there are support systems online. We'll use like QuickBooks as an example. So if the mission, goal, and objective is to be the best accounting firm possible, we're doing this by using an information system on a day-to-day basis that supports us in our accounting efforts. So this is just one example of how we can tie the goals and objectives to an information system. And ultimately what we want to do is we want to connect the two. We need to bring awareness to the potential customer, the potential client, that their goals and objectives and their functions are entirely supported by information systems. And as we know, using any sort of IT system or information system comes with a set of information technology risks. So we can start identifying what are the impacts that may happen if there is a compromise to a system that's really critical. And so we want to think about the CIA triad when we do identify those systems. Does the data need to be confidential? Does the integrity of the data need to remain intact? And how often is the system accessed so that we make sure we have continuous access? We can start helping the business understand which system is the most important to them, which one are they using the most, where is the most sensitive data, and if some problem occurred, where would the biggest impact be because it is most important to them. So as you're having these conversations, there are some things that you're going to want to listen for. They're going to help you sell even further and help you tie more to the CIA triad. So as you're having this discussion, you're talking about the business, understanding what they do, listening for the information systems that support them. We want to listen for talks of sensitive data. If they're talking about an information system that has PII, or personally identifiable information, NPI, electronic health protected information, trade secrets, financial data, or proprietary information, this is all types of data that we're really going to want to keep confidential. So when you start hearing this sensitive data talk, we can start associating confidentiality to it. There may be situations where integrity could be really important, and availability could be important too if this is something that's a continuous process. This data is continuously accessed. So we want to listen for talks of sensitive data. As I've said before, daily system use can be really important. We can tie that to the CIA triad as well. And what we want to do is we want to listen to the fact of which system is used the most. What are the top three that we can listen to and go, these three sound really important to you on your day-to-day business? We want to ask those questions and make sure that we're getting the right understanding of what's important to the decision maker that we're talking to. Another thing that can support the sale of cyber liability insurance is a need for compliance requirements. There are certain companies that fall within specific industries that do require cybersecurity protections, and one of those may be a cyber liability policy. So if we start listening for compliance requirements, we can tie CIA impacts to those as well. So if a company is non-compliant, there may be regulatory fines or penalties, they may lose customer trust, or they may have to pay out a lot for a cyber investigation or even a breach notification to the customers if data has been exfiltrated. So we can listen to these compliance requirements and help them understand that there may be impacts in the form of cost that they can shift the liability to the insured by purchasing cyber liability insurance. And the last one is past cyber events. Now, this can be cyber events that have happened to the company directly, or we can reference other cyber events that they know about. Maybe there's a peer in the industry or a business partner or an employee that was hacked at home, right? And we want to bring awareness to the fact that these are real threats. These are real risks that we need to mitigate. And so getting an understanding of what past cyber experiences the decision maker has had can help them make an informed decision as well as be convincing for them to purchase a cyber liability insurance policy. So we want to keep an eye out for these four topics as we uncover how does this business work, what is most important to them, and what information systems are supporting them. And so what we want to do is we want to sell to the problem. So the risks to the company, the cyber risks, are their problems. So we can, as we listen into these, we can start asking specific questions about the data. And again, we can tie those to the CIA triad. So call out those top three systems. If X system's data was exposed, how would that impact the business? Or we can go with integrity. Do we need this system's data to be trusted? And if some alterations were made through it by a ransomware attack, or if a hacker came in and changed data, what would happen to the operation efficiency? And then finally, continuous access. If this is something that they're accessing a lot and it becomes unavailable for a day or a week based on the type of attack, what could happen to the business and would it distract their employees? Now, we know that there are going to be significant impacts after we ask this question, and what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get these yes answers. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the next slide, but there are some things that we can ask that we know we're going to get yes to. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to overcome objections that show up often as people are thinking about their cyber decisions. So a lot of times people may not believe they're a target, or simply think that this won't happen to me. So we need to defeat that by getting them to acknowledge that they do have risks and that they do have issues that they need to get on top of. And one of the things that can help reduce their risk is a cyber liability policy. So let's get them to say yes. So let's go a little bit further into that and get an idea of what that looks like. So as I said, we want to ask yes, answer questions. And so over here on the right, what we have is a list that you could start with, but you can really come up with your own. And this is going to bring more credibility and awareness to the discussion that you're having about purchasing the cyber liability policy. When we get this, we bring reality to it, we overcome the objections, and we help them understand that this is a real issue. The other thing that you want to tie this to is the fact that they operate on technology. They may have a business function, purpose, or goal and objective, but the way that they get there on a day-to-day basis is with their IT systems. So when we can start getting them to see that these IT systems are critical to protect, we can start giving a more convincing conversation. So something that you may be able to ask, we definitely know the answer to, is, has anyone in the company ever received a phishing email? I've received a phishing email. I'm sure anybody listening to this has, so we know we're going to get a yes answer. There's a risk right away. Have any of the business contacts or associates or customers been involved in a cyber incident? Now, this is where people understand that anybody in close proximity that has a problem, they may have a feeling that that could happen to them as well. So this could be a good way to get on top of those objections if they feel that it may not happen to them. We can also ask them the importance of their posture when it comes to protecting their information. So can we say, is your critical data important enough to invest in its protection? One of the ways that you can protect against it is to insure it. And so this is a very simple concept that everybody knows in their day-to-day lives. Everybody has insurance in one form or another. And so we can ask them, do they care? That's effectively what we're asking here. Do you care enough to invest and protect this data? And then finally, we want to hit the trust relationships between the business and their customers and their partners and their peers. And we want to know that if cyber protections would help protect them and help maintain that trust relationship. And we know that they're going to say yes. Businesses want repeat customers. They want people to come back. And if there is a cyber problem and there is an exposure of data, they may have a problem where customers no longer trust them and there may be impacts to the business. So again, this is where that CIA shows up again. One thing I really want to talk about before we start throwing out numbers and using all the scare tactics about viruses and things like that. Now, that is one technique that you can use, but unfortunately, when we talk about cybersecurity, we use a risk-based approach, and fear and statistics are not a risk-based approach. These are things that will not connect with your customer. They may be convincing in using this fear to get them to buy something, but you're really not setting up the customer for success. They're making decisions to avoid things, not because they see it as an asset and they see it as something that can help their business run efficiently. So when we can tie risk, their mission, goals, and objectives, their systems, their sensitive data all together for them and help them understand that they need to protect and insure these items, is a much more convincing argument than trying to scare somebody. The other thing here is when we talk about statistics in cybersecurity, they're kind of all over the place and they're quite difficult to actually quantify and qualify. There have also been numerous cases of cybersecurity statistics that have come out that have later been proven false. You may have heard that 60% of small and medium-sized businesses go out of business after a cyber attack. This is simply not true. And this was a misquote that was entered into a legislative discussion. Somebody saw it, grabbed it, and you've probably seen it shared on the internet. So we want to be careful with the statistics that we're using because sometimes they get a little bit too sensationalized and sometimes they can really be difficult to bring it home. It doesn't mean as much to somebody using statistics, but when you can talk about their information systems, they're going to be able to relate to that better and they're going to be able to understand it better. So that is my brief discussion on how to sell more cyber liability insurance. So just to recap here, understand the risk formula, understand the likelihood side and the impact side. understand that for impacts, we think about the CIA, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And then we can start asking questions to highlight which information systems are the most important to the business. And then we can start asking questions about what would happen in terms of impact if there was a cyber incident. So we can talk about the confidentiality problems, the integrity problems, and the availability problems. And we can tie that all together to help them understand why they need a cyber liability insurance policy. Now you can also help them understand that the cyber liability insurance policy shifts the financial burden after a cyber incident has happened to the insured. This way they understand these big fines and fees and penalties may be able to be avoided, and the impacts to the business will be reduced. They'll have access to some cybersecurity services, as well as potentially an investigator if they need to contact somebody. And so we want to throw the benefits out there at the end and help them understand that all of the way that these information systems are connected, it's critical to protect them to reduce the likelihood and reduce the impact. And that's where cyber liability insurance comes into play. Thanks for listening. If you want to contact me again, I'm Dustin at TechX Cyber. I've got a lot more educational content at techxcyber.com/educational-resources. And I encourage you to go and read a little bit more and listen a little bit more about risk so that we can have these conversations and be more convincing and get those policies sold. Thanks a lot.